to today's webinar, which is about key issues for blended and online learning quality in higher education. And thank you very much for taking time out and being here with us today. I'm Hassan Salim, the CETL Director and Professor of Management Information Systems in the College of Business and Economics. And allow me first, on the 49th anniversary of the National Day of the United Arab Emirates, and on behalf of the CETL team, to convey the warmest congratulations to the kind people of the United Arab Emirates. This webinar is organized by the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning, CETL, at the United Arab Emirates University. It's the fifth and last in CETL webinar series in Digital Learning, the New Normal. Now it's my pleasure and honor to introduce our distinguished speaker for the second week in a row, Professor Charles Graham from Brigham Young University.
Charles Graham is a department chair and professor of instructional psychology and technology at Brigham Young University, which is located in Utah, in the United States of America. He actually graduated from Brigham Young University with a Bachelor of Science in Electrical and Computer Engineering, then moved on to the University of Illinois, where he earned a Master of Science degree in Electrical Engineering. Thereafter, he received a PhD in Instructional Systems Technology from Indiana University, Bloomington. Professor Charles is a world-renowned expert in the design and evaluation of online and blended learning environments, as well as how the use of technology can enhance teaching and learning within both the K-12 and higher education sectors.
Professor Charles has authored over 50 academic research articles in over 24 peer-reviewed journals and has published over 20 book chapters in edited books. The impact of his research is phenomenal, with over 20,000 citations recorded by Google Scholar, an H-index of 52, and an I-index of 104.
We believe his knowledge will benefit educational leaders, teachers, and researchers within the UAE.
For educational leaders, he has co-edited 2 books, which are essentially handbooks on how academic institutions can successfully transition from traditional teaching pedagogies to a blended learning format. For teachers, he has co-authored a book which clearly explains how courses should be designed and delivered in blended learning environments. For researchers, he has published a book which describes how research should be conducted in online and blended learning contexts. Additionally, Professor Charles is a fellow of the Online Learning Consortium for outstanding achievement in advancing theory, research, and effective practice in online and blended learning.
Ultimately, he has made significant and remarkable contributions to the field of education with his expertise in blended teaching and learning.
And just a little housekeeping before we get started. A recorded version of this webinar will be made available to all participants and to all UAEU teaching community. A copy of the slides will be shared as well. And we would love to read and hear from you. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box. Charles will answer most of them during the presentation. And if we have time at the end, we might have a live Q&A like what we did last week. And please keep your microphone muted and raise your electronic hand during the live Q&A time. You will be asked to unmute your microphone in a first-come, first-served basis. Now, without any further ado, I pass it to Charles.
Thank you, Hassan and Jimmy, for that generous introduction. I'm going to make sure that I've got my chat here going, and I'm going to put a link to the slides in the chat so that you can follow along if you'd like to do it that way. Once again, thank you for having me here at UAEU. I'm grateful for the interactions that I had last week and that I've had when I've come out to the United Arab Emirates, and grateful for the work that's being done here. Here is a little bit about me. You can see my home there in Brigham Young University. at the base of the mountains, where I am right now. I am grateful for my family. We recently celebrated Thanksgiving here in the United States. And one thing that I love about the culture there in the United Arab Emirates is your love of family and valuing of family. They mentioned some of the books that I've written. I just want to let you know that this book called Blended Learning Research Perspectives, we're currently in the midst of the final steps of completing a third volume of this book that will come out soon. I think that will be a really have even more current things related to blended teaching and blended learning for you. So I want to start here in the chat, because I hope that for this to be a more interactive workshop, webinar. If you'll find the chat button on your computer, and please put in the chat message just so we can get to know and get a sense for everyone who's here, your name, the institution that you're coming from, and what your role is at the institution. If you're a faculty, administrator, and so on. So we'll just look in the chat here. Kersad, an instructor from UAEU, great. Steve Kruns, I think I've seen you before. Steve, glad to have you here. Jane from Zayed University, good. Ahmed Fariba from Zayed University. From the chemistry department, Yasser from UAEU, glad to have you here. Sean from the CETL, hi Sean. This is great. Thank you for sharing and letting us know that you're here. What a wide range of places that we have people coming from. This is very good. So we're going to be using the chat throughout. So go ahead and keep your chat box open. The agenda for today, we're going to be talking about key issues. Think about our work in teaching and learning as, think of this metaphor of a stool with legs. And a three-legged stool, each leg is important. And if any one of those legs is broken, the stool won't stand. And so before I kind of tell you what some of the big important issues are, or key issues that I think of, I would like to hear from you. What are some of the barriers that you see to quality and blended online learning? Because these might affect what any one of these legs are to the stool. So if you'll just type in the chat space, what are some, when you think about trying to create a quality online or blended environment in your classroom, what are some of the barriers? Student engagement. Okay, that's an important one. Sustained engagement. Very good. Student motivation. Very important one. Engagement and understanding. Seems like this engagement's a theme that we talked about last week. Teacher engagement, Kershad says. This is important too, not just students, right? Connecting. Okay, there's Marlene says poor or unstable internet connection. So certainly a technical infrastructure is important, right? Lack of teacher experience. We're going to talk about that today. So thank you for that. Lack of equipment, practical components, familiarity with technology, teachers' willingness. Okay, this is important too, right? Low levels of interaction. These are some really, really great and core ideas, and we'll touch on many of these today as we go through the presentation that I have put together. So here are kind of three big pillars or legs to this stool that I hope to talk about today, address today. And they all have to do with readiness. And so the number one that I talked about is faculty readiness. So how ready are the faculty to be able to teach? And I'm going to talk about 4 key skills or competencies. We're going to talk about those: online integration, data practices, personalization, and online interaction. The second thing that we're going to talk about, we're going to spend most of our time dealing with faculty because that's what's in most of our control. But I'll also address this issue of student readiness. Their need to have basic technological skills, be able to communicate well online, and have self-regulation skills. Because we know that if students aren't ready, if faculty are ready and students aren't ready, students are not going to, the experience isn't going to be a good one. So those are both important legs of the stool. And then the third is institutional readiness. And there's some things that the institution can do to enable the readiness and the experience of everyone else at the institution. So that's kind of maybe an agenda for how things are going to go today, the things that we're going to be talking about. So to begin with, faculty readiness. So think about yourself. Don't think about everyone else. I want you to focus on yourself and how ready am I? Okay. I have I'm going to give you just a couple minutes. Please click on that link. I'll put the link in the chat space too, so that you have access to it more easily. Here we go. Please go to this link. It has a little self-evaluation that I want you to do, and it will give you a little self-diagnostic report. I will click on it here so that you can see what it looks like when you go. And this will kind of set you up to be thinking about the 4 key skills, competencies that we're gonna talk about. So if you go down here, there's a set of questions around your dispositions. There's a set of questions then around online integration, data practices, personalizing instruction, and online interactions. So please take a minute to do that. This will give you a sense for where you are and help with that. So I think I posted the link in, but I may have posted it not to, I posted it to someone. There it goes to everyone. I'm sorry, I posted it to an individual person who had messaged me. So there's the link. We'll take just a minute. While you're doing that, I'm going to just outline these 4 competencies. These 4 core competencies are research-based. We've spent, me and some other colleagues have spent about 3 years investigating, looking at these through in-depth literature reviews and other means as I was a fellow with the Michigan Virtual Learning Research Institute. And we've also spent about a year validating this instrument that you're going to be taking to show that it's actually a valid measure of these 4 key competencies. So each one of these competencies is a pillar in your ability to be able to teach as effectively as a blended teacher. And foundational to that is that you need to have some key dispositions and technology skills that are a foundation, or else the competencies aren't effective. So the first competency is the most important one of all for blended instruction. And this is what we call online integration. Online integration is the ability to combine what you're doing online with what you're doing in person, because that's what the core of what blended learning is, that you're using the online space for its strengths, and you're using the in-person space for its strengths. And knowing how to combine these well is a really important skill. So in order to do this, you need to understand what the range of blended teaching models are. And you also need to know how to create and evaluate the blends, effective blends. And then there's also some skills related to managing the routines and the environment that you're in. And so I'm going to talk just about a couple of these. We won't have time to go into all of them, but in terms of understanding the spectrum of blends, it's important to note that blended learning is an umbrella term. It's becoming the new normal. And so almost many instructors are combining at some level online learning with in-person learning. And so if we look at the spectrum from being completely online here on the right-hand side to being a traditional environment with no online components here on the left-hand side, there's a range. There's what I call, these are all blended learning. There's technology enhanced, where we're not reducing the amount of time that we have in class at all, but we're adding online components that are occurring outside of class. An example of this is the flipped classroom. So you've probably heard about the flipped classroom before. There's some videos here that we're not going to watch in this presentation, but I've provided them for you as a resource. So later, if you want to go watch some actual flipped classrooms in action, you can go do that. But the flipped classroom tries to remove a lecture from the classroom and replace what happens in the classroom with active learning activities, application activities with the instructor, and tries to move some of the lecture, more didactic elements outside of the classroom. So that's an example here of this end of blended learning, which here I'm calling technology enhanced, but these are all elements in the blended learning spectrum. The middle space is probably the one that's most common, and that's where there's some face-to-face classroom time that's eliminated and replaced with online classroom time. And so there's some examples that you can see here. There's two that I wanted to highlight. One is used in large lecture classrooms here at my university, and it's where video lectures and practice, mini video lectures and practice problems and examples are put together for students to do outside of classroom. And then inside of classroom is more like a tutorial session. And they get more problem solving together in the classroom. And this has worked really well because in these large lecture classrooms, it's hard to keep maybe 1,000 students all on the same page at once. And so having some work that they can do at their own pace outside of class is really important. Another example that I wanted to share that's kind of a very different way of thinking about this is an audiology course. In this course, what the faculty were interested in doing is having smaller groups to have discussions. So they had a class of about 100, and they wanted to have smaller, more intimate discussions than they could have with the large class. So they broke the class up into different sections that would come each day that class was held. And so as a student, you might come one day for lecture, and the next day you would go and do some online activities while others of your peers are participating in the in-person lecture or in-person discussion. So there's lots of different ways to implement this model. The final model in this spectrum is what we call mostly online, and that's where most of the instruction is happening in the online space, but there is some optional or supplemental interaction happening in person. So a couple of examples of this are these emporium environments at universities, where students go in and they work through their materials. Maybe they're using adaptive learning software, and they work through their materials. And when they get stuck, they have a live TA or instructor who's there to help them just in time with their needs. So these are a couple of the models, a couple of the examples of the range of blends that you can have. And understanding what that range is and what the possibilities are really important for you to be able to choose something that's going to work in your personal environment. Okay. So the next thing that I want to talk about that's related to this integrating is the ability to evaluate the blends. So whenever anybody evaluates a blend, there's two fundamental questions that we like them to ask. The first is, how are students using the technology? What's their relationship to the technology? And then also, how is the teacher's use of the technology influencing their practice? And so we, a few years ago, we developed a tool to help teachers kind of reflect on this personally, okay? And so here on the left-hand side of the matrix is the pick. This is looking at what students' interaction with the technology is. Are students interacting passively, interactively, or are they using the technology to create? Let me show you here. This has a few little things here on the right-hand side to explain. So the student activities, passive, interactive, or creative, okay? Creative would be not like artistically creative. That's not what we mean. What we mean is they're using the tool to create something. So to create a project, or to create a video, or to create a documentary, or to write a paper. That's where students are creating something, okay? In terms of the teachers, there's replacing, there's amplifying, and there's transforming, okay? And replacing means that the technology that you're using isn't actually giving you any added benefit for the student learning, right? So it's maybe like replacing an in-person lecture with an online lecture, or replacing a worksheet that's on paper with a worksheet that's digital, okay? Amplifying and transforming are ways of using technology that allow you to do something that may not be possible in without the technology. So they're letting you add something of value to the student learning experience. Here are some examples, and the examples placed in the matrix. I want you to be thinking and share in the chat space one idea of an online activity that you might use in your own teaching, okay, as I go through this. So I hope to see in the chat space some ideas from you. There's a little bit of chat going on. Somebody mentioned that this is similar to the SAMR model. There's several models related. There's an article listed in the notes that compares many of the models, okay, used for evaluating. And we've selected the PICRAT. We developed the PICRAT particularly because of this dimension that looks at what students are actually doing with technology. So I would encourage you to go look at those and the comparison of models if you are interested in that. So some great things coming up: group discussion, pre-made podcasts, interactive videos, Kahoot quizzes. These are great ideas, okay? Keep them coming. So you can see that each of these ideas is going to fit somewhere in this model. And I want to say there's no place on this model that's bad, okay? The thing that's bad or that's not desirable is if all of the activities you're doing are all in the same place, okay? So if you have all of the activities in the replacing passive area, then that's probably not good, right? You want to have activities that are spread across and all around in this matrix. So these are some great ideas. I'm gonna, I have another little activity where I'm gonna actually want you to place these on the model. I'm gonna share this link out. If you're on a mobile device, you probably won't be able to edit, but if you're on a computer, I invite you to go to this link. And this also here, I'm modeling for you a way to do interaction in an online class with a shared document. Okay, this is a Google document. Let me show you what it looks like here. This is a document here. Somebody's already starting. This is awesome. Please go ahead and start while I explain. What I want you to do is take your idea, type it into one of these boxes, and drag it to where you think it belongs in the model. The color of the chart that you, or of the box that you select doesn't matter. That's just to give some difference in flavor. Please grab one, edit it, and then drag it on there. So I saw somebody put in interactive video clips, and they place it on interactive and amplifying. So that's really good, right? So it's interactive because students are able to interact with the video clip, and it's amplifying because it's doing the interaction element of the video clip is doing something beyond what would happen just in a passive video clip. Okay, this is good. We see, thank you, Hassan. You probably put the link up there at the top so people could see and get to it more easily. Appreciate that help. So PowerPoints, I'm glad to see that someone put that in. That's something that we use very often, and it probably belongs in that passive replacing area. So that's right. YouTube videos down there in passive replacing. A Blackboard blog, I like that. Creative and transforming, okay? So students are actually creating posts in the blog, which is part of the create, right? They're not just watching something. This is good. This is a good practice to be thinking about, a good thing to do, to practice, to go through as you are trying to think about the technologies and the activities that you would use in your classroom. Google surveys, very good. Watching videos. Twitter feed with student created images. So that's great. Multimedia journals, Blackboard blog. These are really some great ideas. Let me show you. I'm going to jump down to some others have been doing them on different, I guess people just move some around here. Here's some other ideas on this last one that people have been looking at and putting in-class Canvas quiz, reading an online textbook and creating flashcards, discussion boards, peer review of video recordings. So there are lots and lots of ideas here. Let me jump back to the presentation. You can continue to add things there if you want, because you have access to that link to see what other people are doing. This is the key idea that I want to take away from the PICRAT. Besides the fact that it's important to evaluate what kinds of technologies you're using. Novice teachers in blended and online learning tend to put an overabundance of activities in this passive replacing corner down at the left-hand side. And like I said before, there's no space on this chart that's bad. It's important to have some activities that are passive, you know, reading a document or watching a video, you know, but it's also important to know that we want to think more broadly and think particularly about trying to move up towards that right-hand corner where students are creating and we have more student engagement in these upper spaces. So thank you for that. I'm going to pull up the chat. Yes, my face isn't blurred anymore, is it? Okay. I'm sorry, I don't know. Sometimes my camera fuzzes out. And so thank you for letting me know that in the chat. All right. So let's move on to the next skill, data practices. And I saw in the chat that someone just mentioned this is a low score. They got a low score in the data practices. I don't want anybody to feel badly about the scores that you got in that self-evaluation. The self-evaluation is to help you see areas where you might be able to improve your skill set. Okay, so data practice is a really important one for 21st century and for blended teaching. Okay, here are some of the skills. Understanding mastery and time-based progression is an important part of data practices because mastery-based learning is an important genre of blended teaching. Okay, the ability to monitor student activity and growth and use the data to actually improve learning. So many of you are, I'm sure, aware of the difference between time-based progression and mastery-based progression. This is really important because with our new online tools, mastery-based progression is actually possible in a practical way. And so time-based progression looks like this. We have a period in time. Every student is working towards, you know, assignments, trying to achieve certain outcomes that we have. And when we reach that time, we're going to have some students that are performing highly, so maybe 80% or above, and we're going to have some students that are performing at a low level. Maybe they've only achieved 65 or 70%, right? And we say, okay, it's time to move on, and we move on to the next skill. And the challenge with this is those students who haven't reached mastery then are at a disadvantage at the next level, the next time. And so mastery-based progression is based on the idea that we want all students to reach a certain level of mastery, and we let their time vary as opposed to their performance level vary. And so online tools actually make this more possible. What I've seen oftentimes in the most successful classes is a combination between these two, having a rough flow in the timing, but also letting students have more flexibility in their ability to achieve mastery and expecting mastery as opposed to saying, okay, your time is up, we're just going to move on. So maybe it's expecting mastery and saying, if you haven't achieved 80% by this time or whatever your mastery level is, saying we want you to continue on, continue to work towards mastery. And if you continue to work towards mastery, your grade will be able to improve too, because we want you to achieve mastery. Mastery grade books look very different from regular grade books. This is an example. When students have achieved mastery, it shows that they've achieved mastery. And when they haven't, it shows either they're near mastery or they need a lot of extra help. They're in remediation. This also shows how we as teachers can be proactive. And so this is a way of thinking about grading that's not very common in higher ed right now. Some great comments in the chat. If you don't have the chat open, please open the chat. We've got some great comments coming from Mustafa and Steve around these topics. So thank you for contributing that. So I want in the chat for you to answer this question. So we're talking about data practices. And in a normal classroom environment, we can see students, we can look them in the eye, you can see if they're bored or if they're inattentive or things like that. So you're able to get a lot of kind of informal data from watching the students. When we move to an online space, especially an asynchronous space, we lose that we're so used to using intuitively. And so I pose this question that I would like you to put into the Zoom chat. What are some ideas? We don't have that way of looking at students easily. How can we monitor to see student activity online, to see if they're engaged or if they're participating or how they're doing? So put your ideas in the online. Mustafa put touch-based surveys. That's great. Polling is a great way. Asking questions and expecting them to answer questions. That's great. Having them share documents, right? Because you can actually see the activity going on in that shared document, right? Discussions, online discussions are a great way because you see students participating. Questions after each concept covered. It's a great idea there. Questioning random participants. That's also a way to kind of monitor how students are doing. Having them raise hands, calling out names. These are some great ideas for monitoring student activity. One of the things that I want you to know is that there are actually a lot of tools within our learning management systems that let us see some of the activity that's going on. Somebody put in here, I'm just looking, touch-based surveys. I wanted to share an idea about touch-based surveys. I do this in my class. In my online blended class, I do a weekly self-report. This self-report, it takes like 3 minutes for the students to fill out. I ask 4 questions in that report. I ask them to rate on a scale from 1 to 10 their learning experience. I ask them to rate on a scale from 1 to 10 what their personal effort was in the class that week. I ask them to tell me how much time they spent in the class. And I give them an open-ended where they can provide some feedback on what went well for them that week or what advice they would give me about something that could go better. And so it takes them probably 3 minutes to do. I give them a little time at the end of class, or they can do it right after the class ends. And I collect data from this. So you can see this learning experience, weeks 1 through 7, personal effort, weeks 1 through 7, and then the average time spent. This gives me a view into how students are experiencing my class from week to week, when I don't normally have that view in my online space. And so I found this to be really, really useful. There are other tools with data in them that allow you to make changes to the instructions and the things that you do. Many of the LMSs allow you to see how many times students have logged in and or how much time they're spending, how many pages they've looked at, how many times they've contributed to a discussion, how many pages they've read, and so on. Yeah, so Mohammed says these are activity reports. Very good, Mohammed. So I want you to share with us what kind of data you might use to improve the student experience. Because just having data and accessing data is not useful unless it's used to actually make changes to the student experience. So what data do you use? I'll just look in the Zoom chat here first. Activity reports, analytics, attendance. Okay, that's a traditional one. That's good. Any other ideas? Identifying students at risk. Scatter diagram showing student performance. Good. Attendance at random moments. Answers from questions. Okay. These are good. When I think about data, there are two different kinds of data that I think about. There's activity data and there's performance data, and both of these are important, okay? And so you might think in these different categories. Activity data, stuff like participation and attendance, students' time on task, logins or pages read, something that's helping you monitor their engagement in the activities. Performance data has to do with the scores, the assignment scores, the project scores that they get. And so both of these kinds of data are important for having data that you can actually act on. So Steve says, am I the only one who doesn't care about attendance? So I think attendance and participation are important, and I monitor and track that myself. In fact, in our presentation last time, I note who doesn't come to class, and I reach out to them and let them know that I missed them in class, right? That's one way that activity data can be used and acted upon, right? Not just keeping track, but actually doing something to try and let students know that you missed them and acting on that. So great question. Let's see, personalization. Personalization. This is the ability to individualize the environment for a particular student. And I'm going to, these are some different ways that it can be done. In the literature, we talk about personalization in terms of it's not just customizing the instruction for an individual, but it's also giving students some choice and control. And there's 5 dimensions that we talk about, giving them some choice and control over goals, time, place, pace, or path. Okay, it doesn't have to be all of those, but this is the difference between what we call personalization and what I call differentiation. Here's an example of personalization. It's what we call playlists. So think of a music playlist where people have choice about, a list of musical songs, and they can pick which ones they want to listen to. Here is an example of a playlist that lets students make some choices about their goals and their path. So this is a class where we have across the top online integration, data practices, personalization, and online interaction. So these are the 4 skills we're trying to teach our teachers, right? And then we give them a series of activities, and they pick a number of those activities. And we might have some that are required and some that they can select from, but it gives students choice about personalizing their environment. The last skill that we'll talk about is online interaction. It's important to understand the strengths and weaknesses of different modes of interaction, be able to create effective discussions, since discussion is such an important part of what we do as teachers, and then knowing how to provide effective feedback. That's a kind of online interaction that's happening. So I'm not going to talk about all of these. You can get more of these from the book that I'm going to share at the end of the presentation. But we know that teachers can interact, students can interact with these different, with content, with their teacher, and with different peers. And so learning how to do that in the online space is really important, how to do each one of these. An example that I wanted to share of interaction is Flipgrid. So this is online discussion, but video-based online discussion. This is also possible in Blackboard or Canvas, but it allows the video element of it allows students to see facial expressions and emotion and all of that. So it adds a new dimension to the discussion. So this is an example of a discussion where they're trying to introduce a class to women scientists. So they invited a bunch of women scientists to come and share their stories. Okay, so you can get a link to this at the bottom. It's just an example, but I think it was a really cool example of not only inviting guest speakers into a class, but also allowing your students to interact with those speakers. Another idea of interaction in the online space is a practice that I think is going to be very promising moving forward, and this is what we call social annotation tools. So instead of giving students just a reading and then having a discussion about it days later, you can give students a reading and they can actually annotate the reading while they're doing it and answer questions and engage in a discussion while they're reading, embedded within the document that you're having them read, the textbook or the document. And this is really cool, in-place learning. So I would look to this to really transform the way we do readings from the past, right? Where we just give them a textbook and then we expect them to come a week later or something to discuss it. To actually have them doing the discussion while they're reading is really cool. So I think I was going to do a Zoom breakout room. We're running a little bit behind. Sorry, this happens to me sometimes. So we're not going to do a breakout room today, but I would like you to think and ponder about this personally, because if you should be thinking in this presentation about what skills you can work on to improve. If you come away from this presentation and you haven't considered any one of these 4 skills that you can work on, then the presentation won't be as of value for you. So I would like you to try and identify what of these 4 skills do you need to work on. And then if you did that survey, that self-evaluation at the beginning, it's going to give you a bunch of links in each of these areas that you can follow up that will give you additional ideas about how you can strengthen your skills in each of these areas. So I'm going to talk about student readiness and institutional readiness pretty quickly, and then we'll open up to questions. So student readiness, there's these 3 dimensions: technology skills, online communication skills, and self-regulation. This is very, very important, because if teachers are ready for online learning, but students are not ready for online learning, the experience is still going to be a poor one. So we need to find out ways to help our students become ready for this online experience. Okay. So basic technology skills, we need to help them develop basic technology skills so they know how to use their environment properly. We need to help them learn how to communicate in this online space, which is different from communicating in a traditional environment, requires a different set of skills. And we also need to help them learn how to regulate their own learning better. Because the online space, there's lots of research to show that the online space requires more of students in terms of their ability to exercise discipline over their own learning strategies and efforts. Okay, so what can you do to strengthen student readiness? Here is an idea that I think is an important one that you may have used in your classes. This is what I call Unit 0, having a Unit 0. So usually we start in our classes right in with our Unit 1, which is content oriented, and we may not know anything about where our students are in terms of online learning. So I like to include in my courses a Unit 0 that I send out to the students before class even begins. And this unit identifies some online skills that students might need to have. Like if I want them to use the LMS in a particular way, I might have a scavenger hunt where they have to demonstrate that they know how to get feedback in the learning management system. Or let's see, there's a couple of comments. I'm glad that there's some comments going related to the things that we've talked around before. That makes me feel good that you're having a robust discussion there in the chat. Thank you. In this Unit 0, I usually try and outline general skills and norms around the online learning that will help the students be successful in the online space. And so this is a good way to help students start to develop these skills in the class if they haven't developed them independently. Ideally, this Unit 0 will happen at the program level or the university level, but it's not happening that way right now. And so I think I do some things at the course level with a Unit 0. I'm going to talk about institutional readiness briefly, and then we'll open up for online questions. So we did a research study a while ago about stages of adoption at institutions. Stage 1, institutions are aware of blended learning and they're kind of exploring things. Stage 2, they're adopting and starting to implement some things. And then stage 3 is really where they're starting to get they're starting to get some growth and they're more mature in their implementation. So stage 1, awareness but limited support. Stage 2, experimentation with blended and online learning. And stage 3, where there's some really well-established blended learning strategies. Would you just in the chat space quickly type where you think your institution is at right now in terms of this? Do you feel like your institution is at stage 1? They're just starting to explore and be aware. They're at stage 2. They're starting to implement and adopt some practices. Or stage 3, where there's really some well-established practices. So I see a lot of stage 2s between stage 2 and 3. This is good. Stage 2 is a good place to be. And hopefully, if your institutions are at stage 2, they're thinking about strategies to be able to move to stage 3. So I'm just going to outline 3 areas that institutions can work on. This is what I call strategy, structure, and support. And if you work in a center for teaching and learning, I have a checklist here that I think would be very valuable for you, that will help you maybe see some gaps and some areas where you can improve. Across the top of this checklist are the adoption stages. Along the side are these key markers: strategy, structure, and support. Notice under support, we have the technical support for faculty and students, and also pedagogical support, which is what's happening right now through this workshop series, right? But these are really important. And then across in the main space, there's the indicators. So you can look at what indicators are available at my institution right now, and those indicators will help you understand maybe areas that you need to improve on as an institution if you want to strengthen the blended and online learning at your institution. So I do these really quickly because I know most of you are faculty, but this checklist can be very valuable for your centers for teaching and learning, and at the institutional level, that if you want to help support and grow the blended and online learning at the institution. And so, having said that, I'm going to open up for questions. Hassan, we can take questions in the chat, or you can raise your digital hand. And what I want to say, once again, the link to the presentation slides is here, and a free book that has videos and skills related to those 4 competencies we talked about. Most of the examples are K-12. I'll be working on something that has the higher ed examples in the future, but I think that still there's much that can be learned from looking at the skills and the videos that are available in this book. So Hassan, having said that, I'm going to minimize and stop sharing so that we can see faces, and I'm open to questions. And
okay, go ahead, Charles. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm open to questions. If you, I know there's been kind of a robust chat going on, which there was so much going on there that I couldn't follow it deeply. But if there's something from that we want to bring out into this space, I would be happy to talk about that. I think Mustafa and many others had some good ideas. How would you like to proceed here?
Okay, Charles. I think we're gonna open the floor based on first come, first serve. And before we do that, I observed the chat, and there is a question that I actually add my voice to it by Shashidar Bilbasi. I apologize if I did not pronounce the name correctly. It's nice to think about the 3 levels of readiness: the faculty, students, and institution. We have an additional dimension that we felt after the COVID-19 pandemic, and this is the social dimension and the cultural dimension. Uh, uh, Sometimes the culture is affecting the readiness to be there online and blended. For just some examples, or just one example to help you get into this. I know this maybe doesn't exist in the States for a certain extent, and you might have conservative families who do not want their kids to be in front of a camera attending classes, or in front of a camera getting assessed, or anything like that. So this is something that, well, wait, we have a camera that looks like an eye that gets what happens inside our houses in public. There are still some concerns about that. I like the question, actually, and I like that additional dimension to be considered for some societies.
So if I would just say, I think the cultural dimension is very important, right? And I think that we need to be sensitive to the cultural dimension and understand that it's a part of life that is going to affect education no matter where we are in the world. You know, the culture is going to have an important effect on the kinds of things that we can do and the kinds of things that we choose to do. What I would say about this is it's important to establish the value the value of online space, and to have lots of conversations with people. So Hassan, you know that I talked to you because we had a question that came up about this in our last session. So understanding what the concerns are, for example, around having video in the home, and then trying to find solutions to that, which will still allow students to be at a distance. So some of the things that I thought about were, there's technological solutions, like right now I'm using a background. This background is chosen to give me some privacy, right? So you can see my face, you can see me, but you cannot see the what's happening behind me in the home. Okay. There's also solutions like I can create filters. Now, I'm just going to put on a COVID filter so you can see. Okay. This is a digital solution, right? It covers my face in a certain way. I could imagine if there's culturally sensitive needs to have certain parts of the face covered, there's technological ways of making that happen, right? Maybe having a virtual burqa that could be used for the families who feel that way, that might help them feel more confident, right? Non-technological solutions would be having families designate a place in the home that is their learning space, that is a place that is private, that is designated as that, and can serve that purpose, right? And in some sense, it seems like that it's, if they're worried about safety or privacy, that's even better for them to have the learning happening right there in their home. And so, but I think it's a dialogue that has to happen within the culture, with the people, and exploring what the possibilities are, both the technological solutions as well as the other solutions, but not give up. What we really are about is we want to improve the quality and the access for all of our learners, right? So Hassan and whoever made that comment, that's a great thing. And you will find solutions for this in your own particular culture.
For sure, sir. The first question from our excellent audience, I just like the audience being engaged. It's from Professor Yasser. You're unmuted already. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Charles, for the perfect presentation. I like it, and it's really supportive and continuation of your previous presentation as well. And I also admire the first example that you mentioned, the 3 legs tool, where it all depends and all related to each other, where you're talking about the teacher, the student, and also the institution readiness. I believe, without any compliment, that the institution is ready for the online, and the CETL is doing a very nice job. However, as a teacher, I'm trying to do my best in online, but we're facing 2 problems. 2 of my kids are already at the university, and they already tell me about problems that they are facing with online teaching or online experience from the teacher themselves. So the teacher's readiness is a very important factor. If the teacher is forced to do online, then by all means, the message is not going to be reached. And he's not going to do it right. And also, you forget about the whole thing. And if this is also complemented with problems with the students that they may abuse the system, then that will be trouble. So the online will be the online. I'm not going to be pessimistic here, but the point is, I've been facing this like throughout this semester and last semester as well. So how can we make it really attractive for the teacher before the student? And if we do that concurrently, how can we do it also attractive for the student in order to positively interact with the experience and benefit from? I like the idea of unit zero. And I mentioned in the chat box that this is very, very useful. It's an excellent idea, but perhaps the CETL can help us in this so that we can accommodate unit zero at the beginning of the course, and with all the technical support, we can prevent the students ahead of time from abusing the system and get them ready for the perfection in the online usage. So it is like a complete story. That's why I like the whole thing.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Yasser. And before, Charles, before you get into this, I'm going to bring a question that was asked by Steve Kranz in the previous presentation about certifying faculty members, some kind of uh, uh, indicators of how ready each colleague to facilitate an online or blended courses, because how do we measure the four competencies at the faculty level, and we say that these are the faculty members or instructors who are ready to take over online and blended course? Because I think the point made by Professor Yasser is very valid. Thank you.
Yeah. I think that this is you make a really good point. I think COVID has complicated things for us in this area because of COVID, most faculty and students have been, required or forced to go online, whether they're ready or not. And that's usually, in my experience, doesn't lead to the best kind of instruction. When faculty are forced to do things, they go resisting oftentimes. And so my approach, I think COVID has presented it's a complicated time because people are being required to do something that they might not otherwise want to do. This is part of why I have that institutional checklist, because I think the institutional adoption checklist, like one of the pieces in that is providing incentives for faculty to become certified or to become skilled up in being able to teach. Most faculty were not given any training on how to teach in the classroom either, in a traditional classroom, right? They got their PhD somewhere, in chemistry or in biology or psychology, and then they came and they were just expected to teach and nobody taught them how. The difference is they spent probably 20 years in a classroom observing and experiencing that mode of learning. So I think what Hassan is doing in the CETL is great. I think it's going to be something that's going to take time. I like what some universities have done. The most successful universities that I've seen have said teaching online is a privilege, or teaching blended is a privilege, right? And in order to do it, you need to take this workshop or this class and become certified to teach online. Demonstrate to us that you can do it effectively, and then you can do it. And then the pressure starts coming from students and starts coming from the academic units, right? Because the academic units feel like we have students who want access to blended and online classes, because students once they see the value of it, many will start asking for it, right? And so then it comes in a more productive, more positive way, rather than the institution just saying you have to do this, you have to do this.
Well, great, Charles. Thank you. We do not have any more hands raised. I hope if you have any question, just raise your hand. And I would like to share with you and our audience as well. I myself wrote that the university the UAE university is in or at stage 2. Having said that, we've developed the digital learning strategy for the first time in order to move the institution from stage 2 to stage 3. In order to do that, a significant part of the digital learning strategic plan is to work on student readiness and faculty readiness, because based on my humble experience in the last 4 years of transforming courses to blended learning, training our faculty members made a big difference in their approach and their attitude toward transforming their courses. So the more skills are going to be enabling our faculty to have, the more successful we will be in transforming our courses and programs to be online and blended. Correct me if I'm wrong, Charles, please.
No, this is really important. It's kind of like this. It's kind of like a balance, a yin and yang, because you could have let's say you have a faculty who's skilled up in teaching online, but the majority of the students that are in that faculty's class are not prepared to learn online. What could happen is the students have a poor experience in the class, not because the teacher's not good, but because the students don't know how to be successful in that environment. And so then the teacher gets a poor student rating or poor class rating. And then the teacher says, oh, I'm not going to do that anymore because it was too hard and the students didn't rate me well, right? So there's these two parts of the balance that are really important. The teachers need to develop skills, but the students also need to develop skills. So this is part of why the Unit 0 is so important. As a teacher, what you're doing with the Unit 0 is you're saying, what are the essential skills that my students need to know to be successful? One of the examples from my own teaching that frustrated me a lot was I was really good at giving feedback to the students. And I would go in, I would put comments in their rubric, I would give them all this rich feedback. And then there was one point in my career, I realized, I can't remember exactly what it was, but I was talking with a student and I said, well, you know, this feedback that I gave you, and the student was like, what? You're giving me feedback? You know, and the student did not know how to go into the grade book and click on the button that showed the rubric that had all the feedback I was filling out in it. So I was doing all of this effort to create this student-teacher interaction and provide feedback. And because the student had poor skills, the student didn't even know how to access that, right? So now in my Unit 0, for example, I go in and I have the students do a little scavenger hunt, a little game where they have to go and find a piece of feedback that I give them. They have to be able to post in a discussion space. They have to set their notifications so that when I post to the announcements, I know that the notifications are set so that announcements make it to them, you know, get pushed to them. And so I do all of these little things to try and set up so that they're going to have a successful learning experience. And students who already know how to do it very fast. Students who don't know how to do it, I try and provide the scaffolding to help them learn how to do that.
Let me wrap up by reading some opinions coming from our audience on the chat. Breda, for example, saying, we have been upskilled at an exponential rate. It's amazing. The binary switch from pre-COVID to our status quo now. Some universities, that is from Mustafa Amin, some universities does teacher mentoring programs to help teachers get through this. It's a learning curve, which we agree. I hope UAEU achieves University of the Future. That is Steve, and I do add my voice to you, Steve. And yes, teachers worrying about ratings is a huge problem. Assuming that students are technically ready is a big mistake, and I really second that, because in our move to online after the pandemic, the CETL started to be involved with developing our students to master the tools that they will be using after the pandemic. That's mostly all what we have in here. And well, I cannot thank you enough for another excellent session. And well, I hate to say that we're going to have to go through a break before we come up with another lineup with a different theme starting January 2021. And since we're not going to be meeting, you enjoy your breaks and you enjoy your Christmas holidays and you enjoy your New Year's and you enjoy whatever holidays you will have, wherever you are. We have audience from different institutions. Zayed University, you're doing great to the extent that we're saying, have we made this webinar to university, to Zayed University? So thank you very much. We highly appreciate you joining us, and I hope we're going to join you in your webinars as well. And see you, inshallah, in 2021. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you all.